to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Megha Gulati, a young ophthalmologist who's a consultant vitreoretina, uvea, and immunology services at Visakhapatnam Center of LVPI. And she's going to be talking on clinical aspects of keratic precipitates. On to you, Dr. Megha.
Thank you, Dr. Chitra. I would like to start with thanking AIOS-ARC and Dr. Chitra Ramamurthy for giving me this great opportunity. Are my slides visible?
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So today I will be dealing with the topic which is given to me, that is clinical relevance of keratic precipitates. So what are these keratic precipitates? These are inflammatory cellular aggregates which gets deposited on the corneal endothelium, and they are composed of epithelioid cells, lymphocytes, and polymorphonuclear cells, which can be seen in various types of ocular inflammation, few of which are mentioned here, like non-infectious and infectious uveitis, microbial keratitis, microsporidal keratoconjunctivitis, and graft rejection. But if we see the keratic precipitates in all these pathologies, are they the same? So we will try to answer this question through today's presentation. Are all keratic precipitates same? So if we try to analyze the keratic precipitates, they differ in size. They may vary from small to large. In location, they might be localized or generalized. In pigmentation, they might be non-pigmented or pigmented, and in appearance. So objective of my today's presentation will be dealing with clinical relevance of size, shape, location, and pigmentation of keratic precipitates. Starting with the first point, size of keratic precipitates. Now, they can be small, fine aggregates of inflammatory cells, which we usually term as non-granulomatous keratic precipitates. They might be large, greasy appearing aggregates of inflammatory cells, which are called mutton fat or granulomatous keratic precipitates. These non-granulomatous and granulomatous keratic precipitates are extreme instances and are misleading terminologies. Why am I saying so? Now, both the types, the non-granulomatous and granulomatous, may coexist, or they may evolve over the course of disease or therapy. But whatever the situation may be, whenever we see mutton fat or granulomatous keratic precipitates, we have to keep few differentials in our mind. Those are tuberculosis, sarcoidosis, syphilis, Vogt-Konágy-Harada syndrome, sympathetic ophthalmia, viral uveitis, and lens-induced uveitis. So now we saw size of keratic precipitates. Now coming to the second point, shape of keratic precipitates. Usually they are round, smooth, and well-defined keratic precipitates. But few pathologies have particularly defined keratic precipitates, like in Fuchs heterochromic iridocyclitis, we see fine stellate 316 non-pigmented keratic precipitates. Now, they can be dendritiform pattern also, where we have a central core of keratic precipitates and dendritiform pseudopodia, which is projecting from each central core. They are usually described for infectious uveitis, in particular viral uveitis and endophthalmitis. Point-shaped keratic precipitates, as we all know, are characteristic of CMV anterior uveitis. So now we saw size and shape. Moving on to location of keratic precipitates. Usually, keratic precipitates are seen in the mid and the lower part of the corneal endothelium, and this characteristic triangular distribution is called the Arlt triangle. This Arlt distribution of keratic precipitates is because of the aqueous convection currents and the cooler temperature in the inferior corneal endothelium. Sometimes, rather than this Arlt distribution, we can have diffuse keratic precipitates. Whenever we have diffuse keratic precipitates, the differentials we have to keep in mind are Fuchs uveitis, sarcoidosis, pars planitis, lens-induced uveitis, and toxoplasmosis. So we saw size, shape, location. Now coming to the fourth point, pigmentation of keratic precipitates. Usually they are non-pigmented. What if we see pigmented keratic precipitates? They are characteristic of viral anterior uveitis. Also, over course of time, keratic precipitates might get pigmented and crenated. So, if in a patient you are seeing pigmented and non-pigmented keratic precipitates, we should think of recurrent or chronic anterior uveitis. So we divided the keratic precipitates and analyzed them into size, shape, location, and pigmentation. To sum up, I will give you 7 clinical pearls. First one, what is the clinical relevance of size of keratic precipitates? Whenever we are seeing mutton fat or granulomatous keratic precipitates, the differentials we keep in mind are tuberculosis, sarcoidosis, syphilis, VKH, sympathetic ophthalmia, viral uveitis, and lens-induced uveitis. Does that mean that when we see non-granulomatous KPs, these are ruled out? No. Granulomatous inflammation might start as non-granulomatous inflammation itself. So, presence of non-granulomatous KPs does not rule out these above mentioned differential diagnoses. Second clinical pearl. What is the clinical relevance of shape? Usually they are round, well-defined, but if you see any characteristic shape like fine stellate KPs, think of Fuchs uveitis. If it is dendritiform KPs, think of viral uveitis and endophthalmitis. And if it is coin shape, think of CMV anterior uveitis. Third clinical pearl. What is the clinical relevance of location of keratic precipitates? As we discussed, that the characteristic distribution is the Arts triangle distribution. But if we see diffuse keratic precipitates, think of Fuchs uveitis, sarcoidosis, pars planitis, lens-induced uveitis, and toxoplasmosis. Fourth clinical pearl, what is the clinical relevance of pigmentation of keratic precipitates? Usually they are non-pigmented, but pigmented keratic precipitates may be seen in viral anterior uveitis and when the KPs become pigmented over course of time. Fourth clinical pearl, how do they evolve over course of time? So they may completely disappear without leaving any residue behind, or they might persist indefinitely. Usually they become crenated and pigmented over time due to phagocytosis of pigment granules. Or they might be a lacuna surrounding them due to the endothelial damage there, and they might form ghost KPs. Now we saw that they might completely disappear. A point here is that keratic precipitates usually disappear much before complete resolution of ocular inflammation. And in Fuchs heterochromic iridocyclitis, they might persist for long or indefinite time even after giving topical steroids. So I would end up with the statement that in early days, like star used to guide direction to the people. Similarly, keratic precipitates, if by slit lamp examination we do a characteristic morphological evaluation, they may act as a window to the underlying uveitis pathology. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Megha, for such a clear, crisp talk of yours. I'll ask one question before Mudit can take on. How would you differentiate endothelial pigment dispersion from keratic precipitates?
So the endothelial pigment dispersion, whenever it is there, it is usually in the center in form of a linear spike, and they are very small, fine pigments. And if we see the keratic precipitates in form of slit, they are aggregates on the endothelium, and they are little bit more broader compared to the pigment dispersion what we see.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Megha. That was a great talk and very nice, lucid examples with which you have explained most of the points about keratic precipitates. But I have a question for all of our panelists, and maybe I'll ask Dr. Avinash and Dr. Ratinam for this. What are the pathologies where you give utmost importance to KPs? I know Megha has already mentioned, but which are the specific pathologies where you think KPs alone may be a very specific diagnostic clue and you should be cognizant of them? Dr. Ratinam, ma'am, you are muted.
In viral uveitis, often it is pigmented. So even though it is acute granulomatous, it is pigmented, and most of the time pressure will also be high. So viral uveitis is central, acute, pigmented KPs. All 3 points are very important. And sarcoid and TB, in sarcoid, angular KPs are more important. They are along the angles rather than in the center. And in Fuchs, it is distributed everywhere. And white KPs, white small stellate KPs. So these 3, even with KPs, we can definitely diagnose. And occasionally tuberculosis can also give acute pigmented KPs.
All right, thank you. Dr. Avinash, any points from your side?
No, I don't think so. I think Madam has said everything. I agree with every point what she said.
Yeah. Well, that's a very nice take-home point. The presence of angular KPs and sarcoidosis is a differentiating point. So that is another one very illuminating take-home point. So thank you so much, ma'am. Any other point or any other inputs from any of our panelists, Dr. JB, Dr. Vishali?
So
Anyone?
what I
Dr.
feel that, that the keratic precipitates, you should not give all the importance to it because it evolves. I have seen that starting with the small keratic precipitates, and then over the course of the time, it becomes large mutton fat KPs. So you need to take the history, you need to examine, you need to see the fibrin is there. Fibrin will not be associated with the mutton fat KPs, or the hypopion, or that aqueous flare or cells, nodules in the Kopi nodule, Busaka's nodules. So based on the KPs only, you should not go to a diagnosis. That's my feeling. And another thing is that toxoplasma also can present with the keratic precipitates, and your view might be difficult. And as the first opportunity to see the fundus, you will see that fundus, there is a toxoplasma or acute retinal necrosis is there or not. So fundus evaluation is very important, even if you see the characteristic KPs.